Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions every Friday morning for general Q&A here. We're live every single day, and we're going to start off with your questions today for our Friday Q&A. Alexander, what's our first question?
First question is coming from Andre Dole in Berlin. Any opinions on the new Birddog XL Ultra PTZ? Looks like a beast with a dual 4/3 inch and 1/1.8 inch sensor. Loads of power and connectivity for under $7,000.
I read that as 70,000 because my eyes are still trying to adjust. I was like, oh my gosh, that's an expensive PTZ. Commas help. Alexander.
You know, it looks really interesting. I haven't delved into the world of PTZ cameras, mostly because I just find that a lot of the cameras have really, really tiny sensors. I'm not really particularly interested in 1-inch sensors. But as someone who has micro 4/3 sensor cameras, I have mirrorless cameras here, and knowing what they are capable of doing with that larger sensor, I'd say this is definitely a step in the right direction. Now, obviously, Sony with the Alpha 7, they have their own full-frame PTZ, which is at a even higher price point than this. But I think for under $7,000 to come out with a camera, which, by the way, is this one. This page goes into a lot of detail about the camera. It looks pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, the bigger sensor is going to be much better in low light. You're going to get better shallow depth of focus, especially in tight spaces. You know, if I were to use these cameras in my little home studio here, and I don't have a ton of space, I'd be able to get pretty decent bokeh with this. I don't know about the rest of the lens, though. I haven't looked at the specs, so I can't really comment too much, but I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. And you get also full bandwidth NDI out of it, so I'm sure others that have more experience with PTZs can talk more about that.
Guy?
Yeah, these are one of the ones where you want to let it settle in the market first. It's a newer kind of two-sensor model where, in theory, it sounds great. You know, you got one camera with the ability to zoom, but you also have a wide shot, and it is a very large sensor. And for that price, I really would be looking even at a used UE150. The ecosystem, if you need control as far as shading, it's very stable, very mature. And I've just had some issues with Birddog in the past, so I'm hesitant to go recommending jumping into that water. As a former Birddog reseller, I sold a ton of their cameras, and the image quality was great, but the control, like fine moves, and then they'd say, like, hey, in the next firmware update, that'll be fixed. It's like, hey, I got a show in an hour. Like, I can't, I need serious tools for serious production. So I would keep looking at the Sony line. And if you just are in love with that sensor, there's a guy named John Benton who does a lot of curling events, and he turned me on to a new camera that has a large sensor. I'll put the link in the chat. That is almost half the price of this unit, and it's something that he's installed a bunch of. So when you're looking at $7,000, ask yourself, do you really need that camera model? And then do you need NDI HX, which is also one of the stars of the show for this one, because some of the older cameras like the UE150 certainly don't do NDI HX3, which is very robust and low latency, because the old NDI HX is higher latency. So even though you might be able to find a UE150 that's used for, let's say, $5,000 or $6,000, you wouldn't want to use those features. You would want to just go full NDI or take the 12G SDI out of it.
The other thing that I found interesting about the Birddog, this XL, is that it seems like they've thrown everything plus the kitchen sink into the back end of this thing in terms of connectivity. And it gives me a little bit of pause, because if they're trying to aim at, they're building the value up, or taking the value of the camera and saying, we're going to throw in just all of this stuff and keep it at a low price point, it makes me concerned about what sorts of sacrifices are being made. So Guy's recommendation is, I think, really solid, because give it a little bit of a wait and see, because it's got balanced XLR in, but what are they going to sound like? What's reliability as far as when you're plugging into these different protocols? Anytime that we have new products, it's okay to get excited about them, but we have to remember that the cost of, I think we like to say, the most expensive part of any production is failure. And so if we're going to put this as a tool, it needs to be rock solid, reliable into our signal chain. We want to make sure that we're not playing with that. Next question.
This one's coming from Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada. With the Panasonic UE150, when in night mode, iris is locked open by factory default. Is there a way to unlock the iris? Sales of Panasonic say this is the expected result that you cannot, trying to use as a low-light IR cam for theater?
Guy.
Yeah, I think the answer is in the question already, but just I use that camera a lot, and there are some things you can do to get it to get better low light performance if it is locked open, or if you do want to get a greater depth of field for whatever reason in lower light, you would do the usual tricks, which are to go ahead and lower the shutter down to something as low as like 1/8, and that way it's called dragging the shutter. The movement's going to appear ghostly, like you're going to get trails of people, but at least in almost pure darkness with very little ambient light, you could at least get an image. The other thing is if you're at 1080p 60 or one of the higher frame rates, you can knock that down to 30 and at least double your exposure there. And of course, you've got your gain structure, and it does get noisy. There is a setting to go in there and limit the gain. You could crank that up as well. And basically, it's kind of like the night mode, but then you would have control of that iris so that you can get an f4 or a 5.6, and it does depend on where you're at in your zoom range too. So something to think about.
Guy, do you have any experience on that UE150 putting it into that, I think it's like the high sensitivity shooting mode instead of the normal mode where they juice the sensor a little bit more, but it's not as simple as just turning up the gain. There's like a whole different mode that is somehow compensating for the extra sensor noise.
I have not got into that mode though. Even at the highest, when I've cranked it up in low light, the amount of noise that it does at the highest end of the limit is, it's like golf balls. So already I'm wondering if it's even going to produce a usable enough image for what he's asking for. So it's one of those things where you go, where's the trade-off to just going, hey, can we just get a light in there? Like even a little bit of light, even if it's a different color or something like that.
Yeah, I went into a deep dive. I was trying to decide what sort of PTZ I was going to buy for an event or rent for an event recently, and so I went down kind of this PTZ rabbit trail of looking at, am I going to go with something from PTZ Optics, or I hadn't looked into the Birddog at the time, but a UE150 or an FR7 or something from OBSBOT. So you guys, somehow the office hours audience knows this because we're just loaded with PTZ questions right at the top of the hour. Let's go to the next question.
This one is coming from the QR code. Jason Robinshaw in Sarasota, Florida. OBSBOT announced a new Tiny 3 webcam to be revealed on January 28. I did not know they offer a trade-in program, too. Any other prosumer manufacturers besides Apple allow trade-ins?
Ronnie?
Yeah, I've seen vendors like Nikon and Sony have trade-in programs for, at least for lenses, not too many bodies, but I've seen that, and I also think shops like B&H Photo and those other ones in Jessops in UK, etc. I think they also have the option to take in cameras and sell that for use. But other than that, I haven't actually given that so much thought.
Yeah, I haven't seen a ton of trade-in programs either, although if more people did go down that route, I think my family and people that I work with would be upset, because usually when I am kind of out trying to live in the future and experimenting with whatever is something on the bleeding edge, I end up giving the next thing down to, it's like my wife's got a really nice office setup, and so she comes into meetings at her office and looks way better than everybody else, but that's because she's just one generation behind whatever we were playing with down here. And then you keep going back. It's like there's a brother, or my brother has a nice setup now, and my sister has a nice setup now, and then I have another direct report that has a nice setup now. So I'm trying to often find where can I sort of justify besides wanting to experiment and understand what's possible, there's a little bit of justification of getting the new stuff, because it's also letting the hand-me-downs be nicer for somebody else. Because if you're 3 or 4 steps ahead in what you're building, and then the next person down the line in terms of who you're giving that last version of your setup to, they're still going to be 2 or 3 steps ahead of the next person. So that's a pretty powerful trade-in program. Next question.
This one is one of my questions. Thinking about the future and looking at HDMI to NDI converters to move away from my ATEM, Kiloview N40 versus N60 encoders. Looks like N60 will output 4K 60, but also show support for newer NDI standards like 6.2. Compared this to the N40, is it more future-proof?
Ronnie.
Yeah, I think the N40 is getting a little long in the tooth, and maybe I can't even see it promoted in the front of their pages. So in that regard, I think the 60 is a little bit more future-proof. It has more power inside it to encode. That's both HX2 and HX3, which the 40, if I remember correctly, does not. It only have the high speed or full speed NDI. So I know the infrastructure you have at your place is probably going to handle the N40. And of course, if you purchase those some years back, they probably be doing the job fine also to this day. But as I see, I'm not sure the firmware is getting as much updates that it should be having. I think the N60 is a much more future-proof product. And of course, it has more power. As you said, it also supports more protocols and is a little bit more, you will get more for your money purchasing those N60s news compared to buying the N40 new at this time of date.
Guy?
Yeah, I'm just going to hold this up and ask, what are you doing on this part of the equation? Because there's more to it than just spending an extra $100 on the newer thing. The performance of your NICs. Let's say, for instance, you bought a new Mac, and because I can see here there's a note that you want to use Beam Alive. Does that Mac have 10 gig Ethernet? So you're starting to go into a different world, So really think about the other components before dropping $100 over there, and figure out the entire chain, because you may need to upgrade your network, your cabling, your NICs. And then you may need to take the classes on the NDI website to really dive deep into some of the gotchas. I mean, I love the ATEMs. You plug them in, SDI just works. If you're going to go into the NDI world, you really need to look at the end-to-end, especially at the 4K level. If you're just doing HD, especially HD over NDI HX3, it's pretty efficient, and you can use even like a campus network and probably get away with no stutters or anything. But just be careful. I just don't want to see you get burned in the middle of a show because you put in some new piece of equipment and there was some little setting that didn't get tweaked and all of a sudden stutter.
Alexander?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with NDI, I'd put everything on a VLAN. I'm not too worried about my networking hardware. I've got all unified stuff that can do 2.5 and even 10 gig. But you're right, Guy. All my Macs are just stuck at 1 gig NICs. Now, I haven't actually done the math. I guess that's the next thing to do the research. If I'm going to run 4 cameras at 4K 60, how much bandwidth do I don't even know if I need 10 gigs. I don't know if 1 gig is enough for that.
You would. It's about 400 megabit per 4K 60. So doing the math, just even 3, you're already over the top, and you need some overhead for your other stuff. So I'd be treading lightly. And those OWC docks and the Sonnet little adapters, like CJ's holding up, those things were great. You can get them now. They're cheap, way cheaper than what they used to be.
The $200, Mickey turned me onto this. This is a Thunderbolt, I think 3 to 10 gig Ethernet, and it's bailed me out of a jam a few times where either I didn't have enough bandwidth that was built into the Mac, or I had an issue with the built-in Mac. NIC was not doing what it should and not agreeing with something, and so then substituting in that, all of a sudden it was like all the other problems started to fall away.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like on the Windows side, I open up the task manager and I can see, if I click on the Ethernet port, I can watch the bandwidth going through. And on the Mac side, it's not as elegant. I mean, there's tools certainly, but you want to see what that stuff's actually doing and flowing. And you could use NDI Access Manager to tell it explicitly to use this NIC, so it doesn't actually traverse some other chain and go down the wrong path, because that's another thing of learning the courses. In the NDI community section of the site, they give away lots of free information that used to cost. I paid a bunch of money for the course before when they charged for it, so to get that for free is pretty amazing, so take advantage of it.
Yeah, Mickey McAture gives us a +1 on read the NDI white papers and get certified. And David Brady in the chat recommends that you keep an eye on Magewell. He's got a link to the Modator 2U from Magewell. Link on that. Appreciate that. Go ahead, Alexander.
Yeah, and one last thing, and I haven't encountered this, but instead of getting separate boxes, does anyone actually make a multi-port HDMI? Like, I have 4 cameras, so instead of getting 4 boxes, it'd be nice to have one rack mount solution where I could just go all HDMI, like 4 HDMI in, and then come out over a network to ND. I don't know if anyone makes anything like that, though. I'd have to do a little more research. I think I just threw a curveball at the panel.
Well, I know you could do it on a PC with NDI Connect Pro and a Blackmagic or AJA card. That's one way of doing it for sure. If other people are listening and want to do it, tie up a machine to do it, and it would have to be a pretty robust machine as well.
Next question.
This question is coming from Mike Beardmore in Bedford, UK. New drone rules came into force in UK this month, requiring those over 100 G to carry an indent transponder and register. How might you retrofit one?
Ronnie?
I think the new rules, I don't know this for UK specifically, but the new rules that are being presented all over Europe these days are that you need to have position as well being sent. And if UK only have the ID, so the ident, that would probably be easy to retrofit. But if it needs position data, you need to hook that into the drone itself, or even have a GPS receiver on that thing. I think that would be really difficult. So my best bet would be to just wait for a firmware update if the hardware you already have will support the new functionality in the hardware already. And make sure that any new drones you purchase have this in place. I think it will be, if it needs position, I need to read up on that, but if it needs position, it will probably be relatively difficult to hook that in and retrofit.
And it looks like the the new rules are, if you have an existing 100-gram or over drone that you've already purchased, that the requirement for what you need to do immediately is to register that drone, and that the ident retrofit requirement is not, you're grandfathered in. You have kind of a grace period until for the next 2 years. So January 2028, we've got a little bit of time. I'm sure there will be somebody who figures out a way to 3D print the harness. It'll probably be for every different drone that's out there. Or at that time, it might be time to buy a new drone. But all that said, the other thing to think about is if you have a drone that is over 200 grams and say your transponder is 50 grams, you may end up having your drone now weigh more than the 250 gram threshold to fly over people. And I know that that's 249 or 250 grams is about where you fall into a different classification in terms of what you are and are not allowed to do with the drone. So the two things to think about are, number one, you've got a little bit of time for your existing drones before you need to actually figure out how to strap that transponder on there. And number two, keep in mind your total weight of that system, so that as you're flying over, you're not putting yourself in any sort of gray area. Next question.
This question is coming from Tom Ferguson here on the panel in Phoenix, Arizona. Now that CES is wrapping up, did anything catch your eye? I saw that worst of show includes AI refrigerators, AI companions, and AI doorbells.
Tom.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of AI in my doorbell because I've got the Unity system. But then again, it won't necessarily recognize me. It recognizes people. My fridge, I don't want my fridge telling me what I want to eat. So I was just wondering if there was anything good. I bought a new TV in December, so not in the market for one of those.
Ronnie?
Yeah, recently I've started looking into Home Assistant. I'm running an instance on my Mac Mini here, and Home Assistant, for those that doesn't know what that is kind of a software that connects to everything smart in your venue or home or whatever. And one of the big things that I tend to look at is trends for the different protocols. And one thing that caught my eye was the increased support for the Matter protocol, which more of these big brands like Apple, Amazon, etc., Samsung, and more are supporting more and more. And what I've seen now from CES is there is a lot of equipment coming out into the market, everything from locks to cameras going into Matter 1.5, and I really looking forward to even more development and new products coming into this. Those that are into Matter does know that IKEA has just recently released a lot of really budget priced products with the Matter. I really looking forward to everything Matter that will be supported, and I see that there is a few brands that are moving more and more over to Matter from both Zigbee and Z-Wave, etc. So that's something that catch my interest.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to see what comes at NAB in a few months as far as utilities that we can use and start to integrate into our workflows, because I look at CES as, especially with, it seems like there's a little sprinkle of AI in everything, as it's a solution that's looking for a problem. Even though they don't officially call it the Consumer Electronics Show, it's just CES. They've taken away kind of the name behind it. It's still, how can we get people to buy things? And with that also comes a bunch of subscriptions. And now, to get there's a almost looking at AI as a door through which they can increase revenue per user, or companies can increase revenue per user when you're looking at the things that you can buy. But all of that is kind of convenience stuff. And where I get excited about the uses of AI is to what, if we have had Michael Cioni from Strata on the show a few times, he calls it the difference between creative AI and utility AI. And really, it's those utility AI things where we're able to either get tools that automate some of the drudgery in our day-to-day in terms of workflow that we're doing to get things done. Therefore, we're able to spend more time with our, monkey brains on the actual creative decisions, or we're able to build a very niche tool using things like Claude Code or ChatGPT Codex. I've been amazed, like just this week, I had a data problem and I was trying to get reporting and telemetry off of a piece of equipment, and it had an API, but I don't have a programmer on staff that understood the API that could write what I needed. So I threw the entire stack of API documentation into Claude, described the problem that I wanted to do, and I was able to get a little Python utility built in a matter of an hour or so that did exactly what I wanted to do. And I didn't even have to leave my office. I didn't have to call somebody. I didn't have to bring a programmer in, try to get them to understand the problem in the same way that I understood the problem. Like, all of those steps went away because I was able to use the AI to take the idea that was in my head and then make a tool that was going to achieve that thing. And that's the piece of AI that I think is exciting, that a lot of the things that we see at CES misses, is that we're trying to solve problems and add perceived value to a product. And is anybody actually going to use it? Is it actually going to be useful? It's much more productive, I think, to look at it in terms of an overall platform or an overall, technology as a tool that we can say, okay, I have this problem that I need a solution for. I'm going to use the AI to help me develop that solution, as opposed to somebody trying to make something more convenient. If you've got questions, you can get them into us 24/7 at askofficehours.global. That is askofficehours.global, and it's open 24/7. There's nothing to sign up for, nothing to log into. Just go to askofficehours.global, put in your name, put in your question, And we'll get to those. If they're general questions, you'll see those filter in on Fridays and now Saturdays. Maybe I'll preamble the next question. And then the audio questions will float into the Wednesday show. So check that out, askofficehours.global. Next question.
This question is coming from Jason Robershaw in Sarasota, Florida. Is the rumor true Saturday Office Hours broadcast will now be public?
The rumors are true. Yes, the rumors are true. So Saturday, as a Q&A, we were doing a little while, had it as a kind of a test day where we were testing out different technologies and giving people an opportunity to get onto the panel in sort of a lower pressure environment than the weekday shows. But now that there are fewer opportunities on the weekday shows, we want Saturday to be two things. Number one, it's a great place for people to get started. It'll be a little, we think that it's going to be simpler questions. The hope is that simpler questions can make their way into Friday. And when we have big, robust, technically deep panels here on a Friday, that this can be the place where your deeper technical questions can go. So still a way to get into the show in a little bit of a lower impact way, but also it gives more time during the week just for general Q&A. And it's a place where you don't, if you miss the show live, that you can still get there after the fact. So no changes on the Sunday front in terms of that's still going to be live only. That's still going to be, you have to be in Makana to get there. But Saturdays are going to be public now, so that will start tomorrow. Next question.
This question is coming in from David Brady in New York City, New York. Has anyone leaned into BitFocus Button Cues features? It looks compelling, but I still have a hard time getting my head around buttons in general.
Ronnie?
Yeah, you're not alone about getting your head around buttons. That is really, really advanced. But once you get a hang of it, so it has a kind of a steep curve getting up to the level that you need to be, especially if you're coming from something like BitFocus Companion. There is another way of thinking of this, and it's much more flexible. I have a license actually running today, so these days I have my mute button. It's blinking really nice green when I'm live, and then it turns steadfast red when I'm muted. So it has a lot of more functionality, and of course, BitFocus being the company they are, having this commercial product called Buttons, they are starting to add features that we earlier used other software like QLab, etc., to do. And this is much more than just a macro. This is actually just replacing a lot of functionality that we already have in QLab. So, of course, you need to have the hardware around buttons. So that's just to kind of glue together all the functionality, whereas software like QLab also can manipulate and function as a server itself, providing both audio and video. And this is one of the differences that people are probably getting a little. It's harder for them to understand that Buttons is just a control surface and has limited functionality for the media server part, if we can call it that. And you need to work with Buttons and just dig into that, and just before you know it, you will understand how the functionality is and the logic behind it. But it's really cool to see software like Buttons is actually developing these new features all the time. I'm not sure that everyone needs them, but the license is pretty easy to get started with. So they have this limited free version. So for those that need to be testing that out, just download it and activate the free license. It's a bit limited, but at least you have the option to try it out and see if it works for you.
Guy?
Actually, that's just what I was about to say, is the free version actually is available now with full features, but it's limited by devices. So you don't have as many of these positions that you could connect. So I know, David, we were playing with this one in the past, and this is one of the beautiful things about Buttons is you can do things like these popovers and things that are more complex that you couldn't do inside of Companion. I haven't downloaded the latest build. it's one of those things where you go, all right, how much time do I want to kill? Because this is a competitor to QLab. So when you look at what the functionality is and how much QLab costs, it may be worth, if you don't need so many operators, it may be worth, downloading this and learning it and beating up on it, because it is free for that first initial tier. Because at first I was paying, I think it was like $20 a month or something like that for that free tier that is now free tier. But if you want to have a team, it does start to get pricey, and that's kind of the model of this, is that they let you get your feet wet, and then they know that for the professional broadcasters that they can just start to ramp up the pricing. And it's great that we went from free companion, which was just users supporting all these devices and putting in all these protocols. But now that it's paid, there's all kinds of features like the QLab-esque features that we're starting to see that are more professional and robust. And these are used in trucks and on the new Stream Deck Studio. So there's actual money at stake here and a real business. So I would say, lean in, just spend some time and allocate a couple hours a week to learning it and see if it works for you.
And if you go over to bitfocus.io/blog, you can see they have their latest updates listed there, including their Q4 update, which did introduce the queue lists as well as conditional actions, where you can actually program logic into the buttons, and the conditional actions are also supported there in the queue list. So definitely a lot to unpack there, and I am I'm resisting the urge to find a problem for this solution, because I could lose a week, Guy.
Yeah, back to that workflow part just for a second here. I don't have my HyperDeck plugged in, but this is one of those things that's pretty unique about it as opposed to regular companion, is that you got this node-based drag and drop schedule, this record and stream at this certain time of day, which you could do manually inside of companion. This is just much more elegant. So that was a new feature, and I believe it was 1.2.2, which is what I'm running now, and I was playing with it, trying to get it to work, and it worked brilliantly. I was like, wow, I just need a machine to make it run, So that's the other thing, is, do you want to burn or tie up a machine to run buttons? Because it is like companion, it's just running an instance of an app, and then the web GUI is what you get. The beautiful thing about it, though, and people don't realize this, is that you can say iPad Mini as a surface, and then you could say, I want 36 buttons across by 36 buttons. So you can have, like I have a 22-inch touch screen, Wacom, and I could program that to be my web browser button. So the possibilities are really, really massive when you think about that. So give it a whirl, David. Try going in and modifying the preset that's called iPad Mini, and then edit it and make it bigger, and you'll see what I mean. And that's the other cool thing, is you can make those buttons as big as you want with cell padding as well.
Next question.
This question comes from Tom Ferguson in Phoenix, Arizona. There was a question we didn't get to last week asking about network-attached storage and archive storage. While the NAS answer comes up a lot, I would like the panel to delve into archive deeper.
All right, Tom, what do you want to know?
Well, just thinking a little bit about my own digital assets. I mean, I've got terabytes of photos and information and so forth, but I'm not sure that family is going to care a whole lot about that, and make sure that, where does all this go? We used to archive things onto optical CDs and DVDs. Well, we know that they're not going to last 100 years like originally promised. Also, formats change over the years. I mean, FLV was very popular a few years back, and now it's gone. Where do we go, and how do we do all this? I would recommend, though, for everybody, there is a great show out there called Save Our Sounds, made by the Smithsonian Institute. It's very old. I mean, it's the old NTSC standard, but it hits on all of these things. How do we archive our sounds? How do we know and pass on to future generations what we own now? Because otherwise, we're going to be the lost generation. We don't print things anymore.
I know. I think I've heard it said before that we're going to be all at once the most well-documented and also the least remembered. because we capture an awful lot, but we don't think about where does it all go. Ronnie?
Yeah, a good example is the pictures that were taken in the 30s and 40s and 50s, and those were taken onto really high quality negatives and developed as a paper copy and put on the wall for ages. And nowadays we can re-scan those negatives and create new really high quality pictures or prints or books or whatever we would like to, based on those original negatives. And I think of negatives as raw format content. So these days we take pictures in different types of apps, and sometimes we save them also to the image roll or the picture roll that we have on our phones or digital gadgets. And the problem is even lately you have the HEVC formats, and you have the MP4 formats for video clips, etc. And you have the Apple format for you take a picture and then it's an animation or just a short, really short movie clip attached to that. Are we sure we can enjoy those original raw format pictures or content also in 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, or maybe even 50 or 100 years? I'm not sure that is because the future is coming so fast, and all these formats are really, really being developed and improved from even from month to month. And I'm not really sure that we can enjoy the things that we are creating today. I'm not sure we can enjoy them in the future, or our kids or the grandchildren. So this is a really, really important thing to think of.
Optical printers, everyone. We're gonna just print it on film. No, but seriously, Mickey says it really well in the chat. It's constant management, maintenance, and updating of archival libraries is a necessity, and he's right. If we care about something moving forward into the future, there is no system that we can devise right now that is going to be guaranteed. The technology, as Ronnie said, is changing all the time. So if you are like me and you've been by choice or by necessity been nominated your family historian and the one who has all of the old pictures and all of the old movies, and you've got to think about taking a hard look at it every, I would say, 3 to 5 years and saying, can I open everything? Is there anything that's in a format that maybe I should consider converting it to one that's more common? Is it something where I have a flash video, or I have something that was created in a program that is kind of on the tail end of being supported, and maybe that company's not going to be around forever? I think about that even when I look at my I took a lot of Insta360 videos recently. That's in a format that Insta360 can open up, and not a whole lot else. Now, if I convert it into another format, I lose some of that metadata and I lose some of that ability to look around. And so that's a concern, because I don't want to lose that functionality. So I have to make some choices of, okay, the things that are worth preserving, I have to have my little, Library of Congress hat on. The things that are worth preserving, that's what I'm going to put time and energy into, and then have a very intentional, thoughtful workflow on how I do that. I'm very fortunate that I have some digital photos in my library today that are 25, 26 years old, right? My family was very early adopter when it came to, digital photography. But when I look at the negatives that I scanned in from around that time, wow, the pictures are so much higher quality just because the technology wasn't there yet. That's not the case today. Things are a lot closer. But I also know that the photos that only existed as negatives, nobody got to see those. So even though they were, quote, preserved, there wasn't any way that somebody could enjoy it. It wasn't part of that living media archive that I was maintaining. So a few years ago, I think I spent every evening for about 3 weeks. I got, an Epson Perfection V600 scanner or something like that and was scanning in negatives 5 at a time, just, putting the little strip into the thing, making sure they were dusted off, scanning them in, doing the correction. And that was one of the best things that I had done, because there were photos that the family had thought were lost that were able to come back. One more note that keeps coming up in the chat, and there's a lot of chat about this, which I love it. I think, David Brady says you got to do the Marie Kondo and say, does this thing bring me joy? Does this picture, does this video bring me joy? That's making it worth saving. But one other thing that comes up in the chat is, if you are going to go with printing, while Walgreens and Shutterstock and 1 hour photo is great, it's not going to be on archival links in paper. So if you really want to get something that is preserved for a long time and you want to make it in print, make sure you think about it. If you want to join in on that chat, by the way, I think it's more than half the show. You can go to officehours.global/join. That's officehours.global/join. And if you sign up there, you can get into our mailing list, so you can see how to get into our Discord community, how to get into Makana, be part of the daily chat, vote on the questions, all that stuff. Check out officehours.global/join. Next question.
This question comes from Mike Beardmore in Bedford, UK. The Office Hours Litigation Special was really informative and hopeful for the future of justice. How should it be promoted across the profession worldwide?
I think if you are in litigation and you found, not in litigation, if you're a practicing attorney and you found that our conversation on media in the courtroom valuable, that's perfect fodder for LinkedIn, I think. And that goes with any of the specials, or I think we're rebranding that to the Tuesday Focus because we're doing them every week now, so they're not a special. But when we're focusing on a specific topic, I think those are some of the most shareable things that we do, because it is where we're spending an entire show focused around one single topic. And it's a great way to introduce folks that maybe are not in the Office Hours community right now to what we do and the kind of things that we talk about. But it's also an opportunity for people that aren't in this community every single day to see what's possible on a YouTube show. Because the level of production that gets produced out of here, thanks to this amazing volunteer community, is something that deserves to be seen by more people. Guy?
Yeah, that was a great show, and it really got me thinking about what can we do for these, let's call them second or third hours type of shows, where we have different topics like this one that, based on what they say, we can feed that text into LLMs and into SEO and things like that, so that it is indexed and it's shareable. Because one of the things is that when we're having these conversations, these great words are spoken, but because Google stops people at the gate, so to speak, and because they own YouTube, and YouTube doesn't want the crawlers crawling it. So I actually took this, the team. So for one, the Shorts team is amazing. And so this is what it looks like in the back end of Opus Clip. And you'll notice if you look on our channel that there's now a few of these that have been busted out. One of the interesting things, though, is you go into like this one here, Media, Technology, and Litigation, and you click here, you could download the subtitles and you could download the transcripts. So every day we're actually generating this data, but it isn't anywhere on the web. So what I'm trying to do right now in my oodles of spare time is I'm feeding Claude Code this recipe that I have in my brain of how do we take that transcript and push it into a web page automatically. Now, I did take the SRT file from this and I put it inside of our YouTube episode. So go watch that episode and watch how snappy the captions are now. And I corrected like Jason's spelling of his name. And so some of these things, when we talk about sharing them, there's a bunch of shorts now that hopefully one of the words that was spoken gets seen by somebody in that arena and wants to push it out and share it. And ideally like a publication, an email, something like that gets picked up because in the conversation, something great was said. So like in that conversation, the judge talked about the tells of being able to look in Zoom and see somebody's eyes and see if they're maybe lying or, could see what's going on. He could see it better in Zoom than he could see it in person because of the magnification of the person's face and, torso. And so it was fascinating. But a clip like that being pushed out to a magazine or wherever these folks hang out, whatever the media is that they use to publish, their traditional ways. Because that's the thing, is we're seeing this transition from, old school print, and maybe a snippet will go in a magazine, but then you go to the website and you could click and you can watch the video. So lots of exciting stuff.
And as people are doing more streaming content, and as people do live content, it's a common problem that we're trying to solve, and that's getting the bits of that live content out to the folks who would potentially watch it later. Because we're not, like, the live show might not show up in somebody's recommendation feed or algorithm, or because of the length of it, isn't that salient point, that little bit of magic that happened during that show, that's not surfacing if somebody just clicks on play. Whereas Shorts is such an incredible way to take a little tiny piece, from a discoverability point of view, take a tiny little piece and just have that show up right in someone's feed. It's kind of if you look at the kind of a channel growth strategy, right? We've got this great live aspect, and anybody that has a live show is building community that way. Shorts is helping with discoverability, and then subscribers, if you have really focused VODs, then those focused VODs are helping to build that subscriber count. So awesome! Thank you to Guy and to the Shorts team for.
Yeah, I think we're just at the cusp of this. I mean, it's exciting. If you get, like, what I'm seeing right now in the back end, what I'm building, you guys are going to be blown away what the future holds for being able to get LLMs to understand what we're saying in these videos. Because what we're saying is valuable, and what they're saying in that conversation is ultra valuable. It's just not indexed and it's not pushed out. What would be great if, let's say, Willard Shepard in that mentioned something. Let's say now somebody asked that exact question. It would be great if ChatGPT responded with his words and directed, accredited him, but to that video. Right now, those words just they're locked. They're locked inside of the video. So being able to extract them is going to be huge in the future for content creators, because search, has been dominated by Google and paid AdWords. But now with LLMs, how do we feed them? Because the traditional ways isn't the same. The traditional ways of robots.txt and all that stuff. How do we extract those captions? Because the auto-generated ones by YouTube are blocked. If you try to tell ChatGPT, go watch this video and give me the transcript, it gets blocked. So does some of the other ones. The only one that can get in is like Perplexity or Atlas if it uses the browser base.
Next question.
This question is coming from Aaron Cody in St. Louis, Missouri. Do you know of an inexpensive device which ingests a 1080p or HDMI signal and outputs the 4 quadrants that image as 720 or 1080 HDMI signals? Something like the AJA HA5-4K, but all HDMI, not for a professional application.
Guy?
Yeah, I have something like this that's called, you can see I bought this thing back in 2024. So this one's called a JTEC 4-in-1 HDMI multi-viewer seamless switcher. This may not be the exact model. This one's $198, but there's some HDMI ones that basically have a remote control and allows you to switch through these different formats, picture-in-a-picture, 2-up, 3-up, 4-up, in different quad splits. So I would take a look at those. The one that I bought is made by a company called JTEC, and they have quite a few different models. So I think that's the arena you want to go into, is something that takes the 4 in and then slices it up.
Next question.
This question is coming in from Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. Real-time motion control robotics, example MRMC Bolt X, are integrating with virtual sets. What is the biggest workflow hurdle right now? The complexity of the robot programming, the accuracy of the camera tracking, example using CinCraft Scenario.
Ronnie?
I would say there are 3 things, and this is on my very limited experience with these types of technology. We have a virtual studio here in my city that we can use and do these productions. And one is latency, and making sure that, especially if this is a multicam shoot, latency is a really pain in the you-know-what. And having everything synchronized is one of the major problems that we always have. Secondary, it's money. The robots themselves are very accurate, but the money and the funding to purchase them and service them is really, really difficult these days. And the third is actually to have the people manning all the positions to actually get this production flowing. There are so much knowledge that are needed to have a production like this work. And we have examples of having a few persons on the crew, and they very, very quickly get overwhelmed and are not able to handle the needed work or all the tasks that needs to be done and taken care of. Even if we can do that as just a few persons, there is so much work that needs to be done and so much details that has to be put into every part of this types of production. So there just lack of people is the third biggest hurdle that we always see that is important.
Another thing, and Mickey mentioned in the chat, is the complexity and the setup time. You just need to have besides just having how many different pieces need to work together, you also have to think about, there's someone whose job is now just to manage power. Because if you have an LED wall that is powering a virtual set, that thing's just going to be power hungry. The other thing that you have to think about is kind of rendering engines. Now, this is from 2024 NAB, but I just brought up a video to kind of show. Let me see if I can make this come up. I just brought up a video to show one of the concerns, and that's the rendering power. You want there to be this virtual set behind someone, but you only want to render the stuff that is inside the frame of the camera, because otherwise you have all of that extra energy that's being spent to render it unnecessarily. So if you look at this video from the NAB floor, you actually have the camera is moving, and then as this arm is moving, what is outside effectively just gets rendered at a much lower resolution. So your environmental lighting isn't changing, but the amount of detail that you're able to get out of what is in frame increases because your resources are better. So just think about those are just a few of the sorts of situations that you're going to find yourself in, decisions that you're going to have to make, and that starts to mount really quickly. So an incredible amount of complexity that, depending on your shoot, might make you think, man, maybe I should have just built that. Next question.
This one is from Yeshua Bell in Antigua and Barbuda. Looking for a camera for office events and workshops, social media use. I know phones work, but wanting a dedicated camera, won't have a pro using it, so it needs to be fairly user-friendly. Thinking zoom lens, no set budget. Any suggestions?
Alexander.
Okay, so this won't solve the zoom lens issue, but the easier to use cameras I find are still web cameras. So the Insta360 Link, which I think you can still get and is on sale, it doesn't have a huge sensor or anything, but it's better than most people's built-in laptop web cameras. But I would probably seriously think of stepping it up. The problem is that I think what you're going to find is when you get into mirrorless cameras is that they will require some time to get used to. There's a lot of menu options to navigate, so you'll probably want to help them set it up. And I'm sure, Yeshua, you probably have a lot of experience with cameras. The cameras like the new Panasonic the G7, or is it GH7 Panasonic camera. That's a micro four thirds camera. I like to suggest those because the camera has a new autofocus system, which is really competitive with Sony and Canon now. It's really, really good image quality. And the cool thing about micro four thirds is that the lenses are super inexpensive. You can get a prime Sigma 30mm lens for about $350 that runs at f1.4, so you'll get lots of light coming into that sensor. You'll get really nice shallow depth of focus if that's what you're looking for. So I really like those cameras. I find the menus on the Panasonic cameras a lot cleaner and simpler than the Sony camera system, and navigating those. I mean, like anything with you, when you spend enough time, you will get used to any menu. I just find the Panasonics are easier for a lot of people to use, and the autofocus is great. So I would look at that. They also have a cooling system in there. So if you have issues with heat, you shouldn't have any problems with that camera shutting down. Just make sure you get the Panasonic dummy battery, and that goes without saying. For any type of camera like this, you'll not want to run that thing on battery.
Ronnie?
Yeah, so I have to just promote a little bit. This is the camera I would recommend, hands down. This is the Sony ZV-E10, and they get the version 2 of this. It has interchangeable lenses. It has a lot of social media usage scenarios, and is one of the most used camera, at least in our area, for these particular reasons. And you can use it as a web camera. I'm using it right now. So what you see here is actually a ZV-10. This is version 1. Which had a slight heating problem, but that is solved by using dummy batteries, etc. And I have the HDMI coming into my video switcher, but it also provides image through a normal UVC web interface, even though this is 720 on this version. I think it's 1080 on the version 2. So that is, of course, it's not a very expensive camera, but it's not a budget-friendly camera, at least when you are starting to add lenses to it. And you probably would choose to use another lens than the kit lens that comes with the camera, because that is really not a lens that is good enough for that camera. The camera is much better, and it should have a really good lens. I think here I have a Sigma 30mm 1.8. Which is stepped a little bit up so that the background is really getting this nice depth of field. Or if I had some light points in the back, you will see that the bokeh is not that bad either. Bokeh is the way that the background light is showing up, and lenses and cameras and all these stuff, they need to be matched. So this is a APS-C camera, which has a slightly smaller sensor than the full frame cameras that we normally look at, and that makes it easier to purchase lenses that are a little bit more budget friendly as well. So that is my 2 cents.
I know you said that you were looking for a dedicated camera, and I know phones work. I would argue that an iPhone 16 or 17 as a dedicated camera that's about $1,200 is a worthwhile camera, and you can dial the complexity of it up and down depending on who's behind the shooting. So if you have somebody who actually understands, how to manage shutter speed and ISO and things like that, then you could get them into the Blackmagic camera app. If it's someone that you just want to be able to point and shoot, then you're going to put them into maybe the stock camera app or an auto mode. The other investment, though, that I think you should make is how am I controlling the motion of that camera? How am I working with whoever is doing the shooting on camera technique? Teaching them to, walk backwards and how to walk while you're tracking a shot to make sure that you're minimizing the steps and the motion that is translating through. Maybe pairing them with something like the Insta360 or the DJI gimbals that you can pop a phone into and then take your footage to a much more professional feeling without necessarily needing to go with the camera. How are you lighting that image? If you have an image that's in an office that's fairly dark, you can invest a lot of money in a camera for a marginal improvement in quality. You can make half that investment in lighting and make that iPhone camera look way better because the scene is well lit. So there's a lot of technique things that you can do that are a lot less money investment that I think are going to make that overall product that you're producing look a lot better. The other thing that I just got to tell a quick story, and this has to do with, I think this was, my goodness, it was 9 years ago because I did it right after the 2017 eclipse. I made a couple videos for a tour where I was on one of those 2-wheeled hoverboards, and then I had whatever iPhone was out at the time on a gimbal. So I had no step motion because I was on wheels, and then I was holding the iPhone on the gimbal, and it was the most compelling video that company had ever seen, that company of their own internal stuff. And we got creative with the tools that we had to produce a good video because they wanted us to do it for nothing. But but that was a testament of what was possible 9 years ago. The tools that are available now between phones and drones and just stabilization in general, if you're thoughtful about how you produce the video, you can produce something that's very compelling and very, it gives you a feeling of how important it is without needing to necessarily spend all of the money on the camera. We'll go one more question.
Last question's coming from Adam Finesilver in Los Angeles. Google has a $99 price for the first year on Google AI Pro. What is your experience with Google AI and Gemini versus ChatGPT and Midjourney at this point?
Alexander?
No, I haven't spent very much time with it, but it is a very, very good service. They're both very, very competitive. One thing that I've noticed at ChatGPT is that they've started cracking down on how far you can go with using it before it tells you that you've run out of credits for the day on the free service. I think and I think, first of all, $99 is extremely reasonable, but I think we all have to get out of this mindset that we expect software for free. This stuff is very expensive to develop, so I think that we need to pay for it. Software needs to be paid for, period.
I've played with image generation in Google AI's Gemini Nano Banana, the ChatGPT now is called Images instead of DALL-E, as well as Midjourney. I found that the Gemini images, the Nano Bananas that is, are the most realistic. If I'm trying to get something that is photorealistic, like I was trying to do something where I was trying to make a mock Christmas card with my family and their pets and things like that. And Midjourney had trouble with it. But if I'm looking for something that's more designed and more illustrated, I might go over to Midjourney. But the Gemini images aren't high res enough for me. So I find like if I'm doing something in Gemini, I end up taking it into like a topaz and doing an upscale before it gets out the other side. So they've all got strengths. The Pro is normally $20 a month, so $100 for the year is, I think, pretty reasonable. Guy?
Yeah, it depends on what you're trying to do, if it's image generation, video, or just have it answer questions or build apps. I'm using a lot of Claude Code, and I run it locally. The thing that stopped me in my tracks when using Gemini and ChatGPT to build any kind of app is that it would run out, and it would say you need to start a new session. And when Shirig showed me Claude Code, it's indefinite. So I can just keep going and going and going and going and have massive files on my local hard drive. So look at Claude Code as well. I would add that into your arsenal. It is start with the $20 a month and see if you hit those limits. And there's a $100 limit, and then there's $200 limit as well.
Thank you, everyone, for hopping in today. I appreciate you coming into the panel and answering questions on this fine Friday morning for episode 2117. Also, thank you to our producers for asking such great questions. If we sent your questions back, we're getting into them again tomorrow on Saturday's show. So if you entered in QR code questions, we'll start again on those tomorrow. If you entered them in Makana, then those will be back in the show when you decide, when you're watching again. Also, thank you to the back-end crew for getting us up here, getting us out to you, having us look and sound good, keep us organized. We have an incredible volunteer community, and we appreciate everybody here. If you saw the bananas, that's the hint. That the Tlaloc traversal today was 84,000 miles. That's 136,000 kilometers and 669 million bananas for scale. All right, we'll see you in after hours. There's too many bananas. I had family over and they're like, "What are all those foam bananas on your desk? What's going on down there?"
They are for scale.
They're for scale. It is simply for scale.
Okay.
All right, see you, everyone.
Sure.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everybody. I appreciate it. Have a phenomenal Friday. Bye.